You are on Tips and Streams with your host, Coca.
What's good, everyone? Welcome back to Tips and Streams. I'm Koken, and I hope you're doing well and feeling locked in wherever you're listening from. All right, let's get to the daily picks. I've got 4 NBA matchups on the card today, so buckle up. We're diving straight into the action. The first prediction for today's NBA games is for the game between the Dallas Mavericks and the Sacramento Kings. I'm looking at Mavericks versus Kings in Sacramento, and the first thing that jumps off the page is how differently these teams behave depending on the zip code. Dallas has been a rough watch away from home, and the results back it up. They've stacked most of their wins in their own building, while the road has been a problem all season. Now they walk into Golden One Center, dealing with a shaky offensive profile and a messy injury situation. And that combination is exactly where I like taking points with the home dog. Let's start with Sacramento, because I've been as critical as anyone. The record is ugly, and the defense has had stretches where it simply can't get stops, like that first half against Detroit when the game got away early. But here's what I care about: how the Kings are playing in this current version. With Zach LaVine out, the offense can look cleaner. Fewer possessions get stuck, the ball pops a bit more, and the roles feel more defined. It doesn't magically turn them into contenders, but it does make them more functional. And in betting terms, functionality plus points is a real angle. And even in losses, Sacramento's vets have shown they can put pressure on a defense. DeMar DeRozan can still live at his spots, control tempo, and manufacture points when things get ugly. Russell Westbrook is chaos in a good way when he's attacking the paint, pushing pace, and creating second actions. That duo alone gives Sacramento a floor where they can hang around, especially at home. Now zoom in on Dallas. The Mavericks have been inconsistent, and it's not just vibes. Their offense has been one of their biggest problems, and when the scoring dries up, they don't have the margin for error to survive sloppy starts. We just saw them dig a hole early against Golden State by giving up a huge first quarter, and you can't keep spotting teams a double-digit head start, especially on the road. The injury list matters, too. Kyrie Irving, Derek Lively, and Dante Exum being out is already a lot of structure missing. Then you add Anthony Davis being questionable after leaving early last game, and now Dallas is staring at a potential ceiling problem. If Davis is limited or sits, the Mavericks lose a major stabilizer on both ends: rim protection, rebounding presence, and a reliable option when possessions get tight. Cooper Flagg has been asked to carry a lot, and he's producing, but I don't love the idea of Dallas relying on tough shot making and bench bursts to cover numbers in a road spot. So the way I see it, this is less about trusting Sacramento blindly and more about attacking the market spot. Dallas traveling, banged up, and already struggling to win away from home. Meanwhile, Sacramento is at home, catching points, and playing a style that has looked smoother without LaVine. My prediction is Sacramento to cover the 3.5-point spread against Dallas. I'm taking the Kings plus the points, and I expect this to be one of those games where Dallas feels in control for pockets, but Sacramento keeps it in the mud and makes every possession matter. Today's second prediction is for the game between the Denver Nuggets and Orlando Magic. I'm looking at this matchup like a classic numbers versus context game. Denver walks into Orlando with the loudest headline in the league after Nikola Jokic just dropped a ridiculous Christmas performance, and the Nuggets as a team have been humming all season offensively. They're putting up about 125.8 points a night on elite efficiency, and when Denver gets comfortable, they turn the game into a math problem you usually cannot solve: paint touches, quick decisions, and threes that come off clean rhythm. Add in Jamal Murray playing confidently, and it's obvious why this team can rip off runs that flip a scoreboard in 2 minutes. But here's where I stop staring at the shiny box scores and start watching the matchup itself. Orlando's identity is defense and pressure. They force turnovers at a strong rate, they contest without panicking, and they do a great job making teams work for clean looks. They also do something that matters against a high-powered offense. They limit opponent three-point attempts better than anyone. That doesn't magically stop Denver, but it can slow the Avalanche. And for a spread like this, slowing the Avalanche is the whole point. Now, I'm not ignoring the obvious concerns. Orlando is banged up. They're missing Moritz Wagner, Jalen Suggs, and Franz Wagner, with Goga Batadze questionable. That's real scoring, real ball pressure, and real rotation stability. On top of that, they're coming off a loss to Charlotte, and their offense can absolutely hit those stretches where it feels like the ball has a parking brake on it. Still, there are two angles I can't shake. First, these teams just saw each other on December 18th in Denver, and Orlando made it competitive early before Denver finished strong. The bigger point for me is that Orlando can make this matchup ugly enough to stay attached, even when they're not fully loaded. Second, Denver is also missing key bodies. Christian Braun, Aaron Gordon, Cameron Johnson, and Tamar Bates are out. That matters because Denver's margin for error gets thinner when you take away defensive wings and secondary options, especially on the road in a building where the home team's energy tends to show up on the defensive end. And yes, I hear the fatigue argument for Orlando, but I also see a Nuggets team coming off an overtime war where Jokic logged heavy minutes and carried a massive workload. Even great teams can come out a touch flat after a game like that, and the trend data points to Denver not always rewarding bettors in these exact spots, especially against Eastern Conference opponents after a win. Orlando also has a recent history of responding well after a loss, which is exactly the situation they're in here. My prediction: I'm backing the Magic to cover the 5.5-point spread against the Nuggets. I'm not saying Denver isn't the better team overall, because I do believe the Nuggets are stronger top to bottom. But with Denver missing multiple starters, with Jokic coming off a high-emotion overtime game, and with Orlando's defense built to keep scores from getting out of hand, I believe Orlando stays inside the number, and I've got a good feeling they can steal the win outright at home. If you're under the legal betting age where you live, treat this as entertainment and game analysis, not a reason to wager. The third prediction for today is for the game between the New York Knicks and Atlanta Hawks. I've got that weird, too obvious feeling with this matchup, and I never ignore it. On paper, New York looks like the clean play. The Knicks are sitting at 21-9. They just survived that wild 126-124 win over Cleveland on Christmas, and their offense is built to punish shaky defense. They're putting up about 120 points a night on strong shooting, and the engine is still Jalen Brunson, who's living in the paint touch, kick-out world, and averaging around 29 a game. Add Karl-Anthony Towns as the spacing big, Mikal Bridges as the steady two-way wing, and OG Anunoby back in the fold, and you've got a lineup that can score in multiple gears. Now look at Atlanta's recent vibe. 5 straight losses, and the defense has been leaking points like a bad roof. They're giving up roughly 120 per game, and that's the kind of number that usually gets you cooked against a top-tier half-court team. On top of that, this is the second night of a back-to-back after a loss to Miami, and that matters because tired legs don't rotate as fast, they don't box out as hard, and they don't close out to shooters with the same pop. So why am I still leaning toward Atlanta with the points? Because the Knicks are not the same team away from home. They've been way more volatile on the road, and they've struggled to consistently cash tickets in that role. When New York isn't getting transition juice, they can drift into long stretches of Brunson, save us, basketball, and that's where the back door opens. Even in that Cleveland game, it wasn't some perfectly controlled masterpiece. It was a fight, and the Knicks needed a huge fourth-quarter burst to get it across the line. If they bring anything less than full focus here, Atlanta can hang around. And Atlanta does have one thing I respect. They generate offense with ball movement and tempo. They're near the top of the league in assists, and when Trae Young is orchestrating, the Hawks can create a bunch of clean looks before the defense gets set. Jalen Johnson has been stuffing the stat sheet with scoring and rebounding, and he's also been consistently piling up assists, which tells you Atlanta can run actions through him when Trae gets blitzed. That kind of playmaking keeps a dog alive, especially at home. Injuries also tilt the texture of the game. New York is missing Josh Hart and Landry Shamet, and Miles McBride is not a lock. That's real perimeter depth and hustle value off the floor. Atlanta is still without Kristaps Porzingis and a couple of frontcourt pieces, which hurts, but the spread is big enough that I'm not asking the Hawks to be better. I'm asking them to compete, make shots, and avoid the one thing that kills underdogs: empty possessions that turn into runouts the other way. My read is that New York probably wins, but the game stays annoyingly close. Atlanta's pace and shot volume can keep the scoreboard moving just enough to prevent New York from landing a clean knockout. My prediction is Hawks plus 7.5, It feels like a spot where the Knicks do the responsible thing and still leave you sweating the margin late. And for anyone who hates taking the points with a slumping team, I get it. If you disagree with me, the safer pivot is total points under 244 because that number is massive, and New York style can turn this into more of a controlled grind than people expect. Today's last prediction is for the game between the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Houston Rockets. Saturday night in Houston feels like one of those classic reality check spots, and I'm walking into it with two thoughts in my head at the same time. The Rockets are the cleaner team right now, but Cleveland has enough shot making to keep this one inside the number. Cleveland is still wearing the scars from that Christmas Day collapse in New York. When you jump out early, build a big cushion, and still let it slip late, that's not just a loss on the scoreboard. That's a punch to your confidence. The frustrating part is that the offense is not the issue. With Donovan Mitchell cooking as a 3-level scorer and Darius Garland setting the table, the Cavs can score in any building. They're one of the top scoring teams in the league, and they get plenty of clean looks from deep. The problem is the other side of the ball. They're giving up too many points, too many comfortable possessions, and too many late-game breakdowns. On the road, that's a dangerous habit, especially against a team that can punish every missed box out. Now flip it to Houston. Even with some recent bumps, the Rockets still have the profile I trust at home: elite rebounding, a defense that can actually set the tone, and an offense that can put pressure on you without needing a perfect shooting night. That win over the Lakers wasn't just a win. It was a statement about their ceiling. They defended with purpose in the second half and turned the game into a grind for the opponent. When Houston gets stops, they don't just stop you. They turn it into momentum, and that's how they build separation. The matchup battle I keep coming back to is possession math. Houston lives on the glass and creates extra chances, and Cleveland's defense has been leaky enough that those second and third looks can turn into a run in a hurry. If Alperen Sengun plays, that interior engine gives Houston another layer, because it forces Cleveland to pick its poison, help in the paint and give up kick-out looks, or stay home and watch the bigs go to work. If Sengun sits, Houston still has enough firepower and structure to control the game, but it can tighten the margin because their half-court flow becomes a little more dependent on shot making. And that's where I see Cleveland hanging around. The Cavs don't have to be perfect to stay competitive. They just have to be disciplined for longer stretches than they've been lately. If they keep the turnovers manageable, keep the ball popping, and lean into that perimeter volume, they can manufacture points even if the defense isn't locking anyone up. I also can't ignore the head-to-head angle. Cleveland has been stuck in the mud against Houston recently, and that usually creates a pride response. Not necessarily a win, but a better fight. So here's how I'm playing it, and I'll say it clearly. I expect Houston to win the game, but I'm taking Cleveland to cover the 6-point spread. I think the Rockets' defense, rebounding, and home court stability get them across the finish line. Yet I also think the Cavaliers' scoring punch keeps it interesting deep into the fourth. If you're not of legal betting age, keep it as pure basketball talk and enjoy the matchup.